I'm Kevin Zhang, one of the investment partners at Upfront, and we're going to talk a little bit about a product that I think most of us here in the room have at their home and use, which is, how does Google Assistant, how does voice and AI broadly change how we're sort of interacting with our world. So really excited to have Manuel here from Google, who's a product manager on the Google Assistant.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I have used pretty much every product you've actually built over the last 15 years, which is everything from playing too much Halo on Xbox in high school to watching too many YouTube videos in college, and now it sounds like you've gone on to work on Google Assistant. Both of those products went from, I think Xbox was 80 million units sold. YouTube obviously ends up hitting 1 billion plus users. Why Google Assistant? Is it going to hit multi-billion users?
It's a great question. I think that, when I see a common thread of the different products that I've worked on, I think the main thing for me has been do something that you're passionate about, where you think that the space has a great opportunity to deliver value to millions of users eventually, and something that the problem space is very interesting. As of lately, funnily enough, I think seeing my kids interacting with the technology has been a big draw of the decisions that I have made of where to go work. Maybe I just want to be a cool dad, but the Google Assistant is no different in that sense. When I look back and I thought about why jump into this space, there were a few things that were super compelling. Number one is, machine learning and artificial intelligence are two areas that are pretty interesting right now, and the desire to think about how do you humanize this technology and make it incredibly accessible was something that got me very excited. The other thing is that if you think about the products that I've worked in the past in YouTube, Xbox, doing games at Zynga, in many cases, people were investing time in those products. And with the Assistant, I think that I have the opportunity to give some of that time back to people and actually work on something that will help people get things done and deliver a ton of value because they can delegate and trust some of the tasks that they don't want to do. And lastly, I think the last thing that actually make it incredibly compelling is that it's super early and it's at a phase where we're building both, not only a product, but you're building a platform and an ecosystem. And not only a software ecosystem, but a hardware ecosystem at the same time. So the opportunity to think about what new things can you build, how can you develop a business model around it, just make it incredibly compelling.
That's awesome. So let's actually set some context then. You talked about hardware ecosystem, software ecosystem, developer ecosystem. How many users and how many developers are on Google Assistant?
Yeah, I'll share some public numbers. Some we announced recently at CES. The Assistant is right now on more than 1 billion devices. So if you count phones, smart speakers, displays, there's 1 billion devices that actually could get activated with the Assistant. We announced that we went from 8 languages to 30 and 80 countries. We announced also that we grew our active user base. We haven't disclosed full numbers, but we grew it by 4x this year. And the other thing is that the ecosystem is thriving. We have about 1,600 different brands of electronic devices that interact with the Assistant, and about 1 million actions have been built for the Assistant by the developer community.
Wow. I'll come back to the language point a little bit later. That's super fascinating to me. So you have that many users. What are some of the most popular use cases? How are people using it?
Yeah. One of the things that we wanted to do with the Assistant is, can we make this product the best way to get things done? And when you have such a lofty goal, you really need to focus on key areas where the product can be super useful. So we started thinking about the home, the car, and mobile devices. And interestingly enough, each of these areas are very, very different. When you think about the Assistant in the home, what we have noticed people doing with it is that in the early morning, there's a lot of peak of usage because people are getting ready for the day. So they're looking at their calendar or they're looking at their commute and they're hearing the news and they're trying to get the house ready and the day ready just to leave. Then when they come back, it's actually, we see another peak at the end of the day when people are coming back from work. And it's mostly about unwinding. They're listening to music, they're listening to podcasts, they're listening to news. Productivity things that we call productivity things like timers and reminders are a core use case these days. In the car, it's slightly different, right? The car actually is one of the surfaces where the assistant technology truly meets the needs of the user because voice, you want to drive safely and you don't want to be looking or touching the screen. So voice is very, very compelling in that use case. And what we see people trying to accomplish in the car is 3 basic things. You want to navigate, from point A to point B, or find a route, a point of interest along the route. You want to communicate, so making calls or sending messages, and of course you want to be entertained. So you see that the uses, they're not always the same depending on the surface. And then the third area, the phone, actually the phone is a very exciting part that we think a lot about, because in the same way that you think about touchscreen becoming kind of like a de facto interface for the device, and when I saw my kids, now they see any screen and they think they can touch it, I think that voice actually has the opportunity to become that big of a paradigm shift. And especially, when I see younger generations and I see my kids using the phone, if they want to make a phone call, they don't open the address book, scroll, find someone and touch. They just say, hey, I'm not going to say hey Google in case it triggers something, but hey Google, call Max, and the activity, the task just happens. So it's very compelling to see how in the case of the phone, it can become a core part of the operating system.
Fascinating. Within the car itself, are we talking you're trying to integrate with the car manufacturers and be part of the system, or it's actually just through the phone and you're really bypassing that whole?
I would say all of the above. I think if you think at the beginning, most people have their phones in their car. A lot of people just put it in front on a dock or something, so you have the opportunity to interact directly with the phone. Then the next thing that you have is when you connect your phone to your car screen, and we call that projected mode, that's where also you are interacting with the phone. And eventually, many cars are coming with interfaces where you can actually speak to the car, and I presume that this technology is going to make its way there as well.
So you guys have been rolling out the display devices as well, as you just talked about, right? And you talked about the phone as obviously the primary one so far that people are using this in combination. How do people's behaviors shift when they have both voice and display at the same time, especially when it's a specific display, not just the one that they carry around with them all the time?
It's a very, we're beginning to learn. We just shipped what we call the Smart Display product recently. And one of the things, again, when I go back to, we want the product to be the best way to get things done. Sometimes voice alone is not the only way to get things done, right? So I believe that the future of this product is going to be multimodal. You're going to use voice, you're going to have a screen. Actually, there's a lot of research that shows that you can speak faster than you type, but you can read faster than you listen. So actually having information in front of you on a screen and being able to quickly select something actually makes the product more convenient. And even when the assistant is not necessarily understanding what you say, it never happens, but when it happens, actually having the screen in front of you that can show you exactly what the assistant heard can help you disambiguate the situation. One of the cool things with the display that we're seeing is that a lot of people are placing it in the kitchen. It's a great environment because you want to be hands-free. If you're cooking, if you're doing something there. One of the core use cases that we're seeing is people actually using it for recipes. So they watch a video, step-by-step recipes, then they get the ingredients. Of course, music, home controls with a screen, that's actually very compelling when you want to adjust your thermostat or when you want to adjust the lights in some place. And of course, it's a display, so videos and photos actually do pretty well in the Surface.
That's awesome. Let's go back to the language point a little bit. You said you went from 8 to 30 languages?
Yeah.
Wow. I was noticing that it was not just Latin languages, and you also had things like Indonesian and some Asian languages as well. They're very different structurally. How did you guys go so quickly from just 8 languages to 30? And then follow-up to that is, do you see just totally different behaviors in other countries of how users use it?
Yeah, no, and credit to the engineering team. Many of you heard Dr. Kai-Fu Lee talking about you need a lot of data sets, and you need, for every language, you want the word error rate to go down dramatically so that it can truly understand you. And the more data sets you have in different markets, the better you can and the faster you can get to make it work. I think that one of the interesting things is that localizing the assistant for any market is not just about translating or actually making it understand the language, but it's actually make it local. When you want the assistant not only actually needs to understand you, but you want it to fulfill tasks for you. So if I want to make a train reservation, or if I want to go to a movie, or if I want to make a dinner reservation, you need the local ecosystem to be plugged into the assistant so that you can deliver the same experience in those markets. And of course, you want the personality, the jokes also to be truly localized for the market. So a lot of the investment goes there. I think an area that surprised us in a meaningful way was emerging markets. As many of you here may know, feature phones are back, and actually they're growing really fast.
I heard they're bringing back the Razr, actually.
They are smart feature phones, so they connect to the internet, and you can do a lot of things with them. But of course, if you think about a feature phone, typing, reading, writing, not so great. So what we're seeing is a big phenomena where the voice-first interaction model is taking off dramatically in these markets. It's actually becoming the way many of these people are accessing the internet and actually asking for information, asking for media playback, and especially also for an if you suffer from illiteracy, actually voice is a great interface to help with that. So we're seeing a lot of things happening in India, pretty amazing growth. People are actually looking for train schedules. People are trying to learn English, so are asking for translation in English, just doing basic math calculations and listening to a lot of music, looking for cricket results. It's pretty amazing.
Wow. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the personality behind a Google Assistant. I remember reading that when you guys initially developed that voice, you interviewed and auditioned hundreds of actors and actresses, that you apparently created this really elaborate backstory about how this is the daughter of a librarian who lives in Colorado and likes to kayak. What was the reason behind that, and what was the sort of archetype or the personality that you guys were trying to go for?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our thinking was, how do you make a product that is reflective to some of the core identity that we think we want Google to have, right? And we think about, to some degree, of course, we want to be very helpful. We want to have some elements of playfulness and some degree of humility as well. And a lot of the thinking was, okay, how do we make this product feel that way? There were two interesting principles. One is, we want the assistant to speak like a human, but we don't want it to pretend to be a human. And there are some personality questions that you will ask the assistant that you will realize that it's not acting or responding like if it was a human being. It's kind of like deferring on that thing. And the other principle was phone in, phone out. If you're actually joking with the assistant, we wanted to make sure that it didn't treat it too seriously and it actually joked back. But there has been a ton of amazing learning around voice interaction. I mean, one of the things that you think about when you do a search on Google these days, if you want to check the weather in Chicago, you will probably just write weather Chicago. You don't try to structure a full sentence and so forth. And as people started using the assistant for the first time, those were the type of queries they were making. They were saying weather Chicago. And as they're starting having the conversations, now you see them structure full sentences and say like, tell me what's going to be the weather in Chicago tomorrow, or is it going to be sunny in LA on Monday? And they ask more structured questions, and you see that the complexity of the dialogue is just going to continue increasing, and the product will get better because of that. The second thing that we realized is that people actually are seeking the personality of the assistant. They ask questions about how old are you. They ask the assistant to tell some jokes. Actually, one of the top 10 things that happen in the US is people say to assistant, I love you, and see what the assistant says back. The awesome song, What Does the Fox Say, is a nice Easter egg. So ask that to the assistant and you will get something funny. And people are trying to see how hot they are. They ask the assistant, am I hot? And the assistant responds to those things. So you see some of the beginnings of people trying to find some personality in this product. And the third thing that tells you a little bit more about where this could be going is people actually want the assistant to know them. They tell them their name, they tell them their name of their kids or their family sometimes, they tell them their birth dates and so forth. And the product actually gets better because of that. When I want to call my wife, I don't say, call her name, I actually say, call my wife. And the product knows that my wife is that person and actually makes the phone call directly.
Do you see this then becoming more and more personalized in the sense that if it's a child versus an adult versus an older person or people in different countries, that you would actually just have all kinds of different personas that become more personalized over time, or where does this kind of go? I mean, obviously we've all seen movies like Her and whatnot. It seems like we're still quite far away from that, but curious, where do you see the trend going? It's
a super interesting question. I think it's early, right? We see some basic things that we're doing. We have a technology that allows us to synthesize voice called WaveNet. And with that technology, we have given the assistant different accents. So you have a British accent, so you have an Australian accent. Maybe one day they'll do my Venezuelan accent, who knows? But you know, it's part of the personalization of the product. We have different voices that you can select from. I think that getting to a place where and the assistant will give you local jokes and local sayings in different markets. I think that getting to a personality that adapts directly to you, it's probably farther out. And honestly, I don't know if that's the most important thing that needs to happen today. I think that it's so early in the game that we're at the tip of the iceberg where people are asking the assistant to do very basic functions, play music, show me a timer, and so forth. And I think the holy grail is when the product starts getting, and we've invested in these areas, more contextual, more personal, and eventually can anticipate you and become very, very proactive, right? So it can actually start doing some very compelling things to you. And one example, for example, that you can try it on, we recently launched, is if the assistant were not personal at all and didn't know my context, and I'm in the car and I want to let my wife know that I'm 20 minutes away, I would have to say, hey Google, how far until I get to Jackson Street in Palo Alto? It will tell me some minutes. And then I would need to say, send, whatever the answer was, send 20 minutes to this phone number. Whereas when the assistant actually gets to know you, it's contextual, all I need to say is, hey Google, send my ETA to my wife, and then it's done. It means that it knows who my wife is, it knows my location so that I can send it, and it knows that actually when I text my wife, I text her on whatever application, and it will know what application to send it to.
What about when you have multiple people in the family using the product, and people kind of use, like you said earlier, right? Some people use more completely sentences, especially younger folks, who almost treat it as another person versus people using very short. Does it end up developing and adapting to different people in the family? Or how do you see that going?
It's not necessarily that it adapts to different people in the family. There are two things actually somewhat related there. One, we introduced a technology called voice match that actually can associate my voice to my persona. Mm-hmm. So that when I'm talking to it, it shows my calendar, it shows my reminders, and when my wife is talking to it, it shows her calendar and her reminders. So that's how it gets very personal with the voice. The second thing that is very interesting is that even for a simple instruction like setting an alarm, there's like thousands of ways in which you could actually say that. And that's where the natural language understanding actually, it's where we invest a lot actually for the product to understand you regardless of how you actually structure your sentence. I'm sure there's room to go, right, but it's getting significantly and dramatically better.
I'd love to hear a little bit about going back to sort of the kids and different population of the users' points. Kind of curious, how are you seeing any new behaviors being developed across whether it's different regions or younger folks or older folks? Like, is that where you're seeing behaviors shift the most versus, to be honest, someone like myself, I use it purely as a utility and I kind of do the same 4 functions over and over again?
Yeah, look, I think that one of the interesting things with voice is that it's so accessible. It's easier a lot to just say a sentence that actually learn the presets or the controls on any given control panel. So people are actually, we're beginning to see not your traditional early adopters of technology embracing this type of product, right? So as I said, you see it in the feature phones being adopted, you see it elderly or senior citizens adopting it, you see kids actually toying a lot with it, and you see different uses, right? For kids, music is a big thing. Asking a lot of personality questions, asking homework questions actually happens a lot. There's also, we have some interesting features like a read along, that you start reading a book and the assistant will make background noise, sound effects that actually make
makes the story come alive.
The book more compelling and make it come to life. And in the case of more senior citizens, home control seems to be one interesting thing that is happening and of course it needs to be set up, but from controlling thermostats to controlling the lights to actually looking at who's knocking on the door and checking the cameras. But also actually, we're very excited about the photos that we have on the smart display because it has a functionality where if I gave it to my dad, he would be able to start seeing in his display photos of my family that uploads real time. So it's a pretty amazing smart photo device, right? So it's really, really good.
That's great. What about on enterprise use cases? How are you seeing sort of a product like this being adaptive for various different industries and use cases and work environments?
That's a great question. Look, one of the things that we realize is that, first of all, you can try to boil the ocean and try to do every single use case, but probably you want to do a really good job at some core use cases, and we're focusing a lot on the consumer space. However, The one thing that is very interesting is that for the assistant to be your personal assistant, it needs to know about you and your setting and your context, right? So if my assistant doesn't know my work schedule or my calendar, it's harder for it to tell me, hey, you need to leave at 9 a.m. so that you don't hit traffic and you can get to this meeting. So I think that you're going to begin to see the interactions or the integration, that make the product be whole so that it can actually be your assistant throughout the day. And then eventually, of course, you can see some features where the assistant could be used to schedule a meeting in the office or to book a conference room. I think that will continue to evolve, but we are mostly focused right now on how do you create the most amazing consumer experience to help people get things done.
That then leads me a little bit to, obviously you guys demonstrated Duplex, right?
Yeah.
It was a little less than a year ago, and there was this incredible demo of Google Assistant calling, I think, for a restaurant reservation or something like that. And you just brought up the point about scheduling meetings for work, et cetera. Where do you sort of see the distinction between I'm asking the Google Assistant to do something that I have a question for versus I'm asking to do something on my behalf?
Yeah, I mean, for those of you who don't know what Duplex is, it's a technology that we announced where the assistant could actually make a phone call to a restaurant or a salon for you and make the reservation. So in the case that the restaurant doesn't have any online booking technology, actually will make the call and it will actually get the reservation done for you. I think that it's a continuum, right? When I ask the assistant to play music, it's kind of doing it for me. When I ask the assistant to make a dinner reservation, sometimes we will partner with, say, an Open Table, and you will get it done through Open Table. But on other instances, as I mentioned, the restaurant may not take the reservation, and may not take the online reservation. So the phone call, actually, making the phone call on your behalf, is actually, it's good. It's a task that I don't have to do anymore. So I think that for us, at the end of the day, is how do we help people get things done? How do we help you complete that task? And the more you build that trust and that relationship, the more you will be willing to delegate some more complex tasks to the assistant, right? And I think that at the end of the day, that's the main way in which the assistant will give you back time and start taking care of things that maybe feel mundane to you for you to be spending your day on.
There's obviously entrepreneurs in the room, and many entrepreneurs, even if they didn't start off with a voice modality, are thinking about whether that might or might not make sense for their product. How do you think about, and I think earlier you said you have tens of thousands of skills or activities on Google Voice. How do you think about what developer attention should be focused on? What is core Google Voice features that you guys will work on versus where the white spaces where you really want entrepreneurs to be spending time?
No, it's a great question. I don't know how many people had the opportunity to attend CES this year. I was there and I was pretty blown away by truly seeing an inflection in the market, right? It was really hard to find a booth, and this is a consumer electronics expo, where some digital assistant was not part of the story. And this is the hardware side of the equation. But as I said, for the assistant to be able to get things done for you, you need the software and the service side of the equation also to be developed. And I know that those both on the hardware and the software service side, it's areas where entrepreneurs can shine and do things that we haven't dreamt of, right? One interesting thing to think about is in the same way that when the transition happened from web to mobile, building great mobile applications was not about taking a website and putting it in an app. I think that in the assistant, entrepreneurs will need to think long and hard about what makes this feature or this service or this offering assistive. If you think about voice, where does voice remove friction and make the experience more seamless for the user? If you think about personal, contextual, and proactive, where can the product learn, be personal, be more contextual, and actually do something great for users that way? And lastly, as I said, I mean, the whole point of the assistant is that you will trust it to do things for you. So what are things that people, think about the busy people who are two working parents, have kids at home, needs to manage their schedule, needs to manage the home, needs to take care of the kids. What tasks would you be willing to delegate to a digital assistant for it to take care of you?
So last question. I have my own sort of personal request for what I would love to see entrepreneurs build, which is me and my friends play a lot of tabletop board games, and to have Google Assistant actually be the game master and be the narratives driving behind social behavior. Anyway, very specific ask. What would be a feature that you would really love to see come out in the near term that you want to see someone else build?
All right, I'll cheat a little bit. I'll tell you an answer, which is a feature, but I'll try to illustrate why it's so compelling. If you think about buying a movie ticket today, you select the theater, take any app, you select the theater, you select the movie, you select the time, you say how many people are going to go, and then you land on a screen that tells you, here are the seats that are available. Sometimes the seats are only in the first row, or you don't get seats together, and then you need to start the process all over again with a different movie or a different theater. In the future, I mean, the ideal scenario would be that I say to the assistant, hey, I want to watch Aquaman, and it will know a few things, right? It will know that Aquaman is a family movie. I'm a family of 4, so I'm probably looking for 4 tickets. It knows that I often go to this movie theater called Shoreline. It knows that I actually, or it assumes that I go to theater usually over weekends. And I said, rather than me going through 7 steps to then realize that there were no tickets available at the time that I was looking for, if I just say, I want to watch Aquaman, and the assistant comes back to me and says, found you 4 tickets at 5 o'clock on Shoreline, that would be amazing. And I think that if you think about any other product category where you actually start making these contextual and personal recommendations, I think that that's an area to build and develop.
I can use that too. I'm sure next year at Summit, someone will have this ready for you.
Awesome. We'll love to see it.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, Manuel.
Yeah.